Good day, everyone watching, and welcome to another engaging session of Inside In-Game Insights. I'm Yasin, the demand advisor here at AdInMo, and today we're diving into the deep concept and dynamic landscape of identity solutions within mobile gaming in the wake of the post-cookie internet, our favorite keyword. So joining me is our remarkable expert in this field, Emma Raz, Director of Commercial at NumberEight. Emma, thrilled to have you. Could you share a bit more about your role at NumberEight and obviously shed some light on the company?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me, and it's always a pleasure. And yeah, let's dig into identity or identity without IDs, which is what I specialize really in. I am Emma Raz. I'm the Director of Commercial NumberEight. It means I run a commercial operation. NumberEight is one of those unique companies or kind of new unique companies within the identity space as it looks at identity in a new way. Identity traditionally has been attached to a concept of an ID at the center of it, finding people on an individual level. And what NumberEight really does is understanding who people are, but not necessarily as identifying them as individuals, but rather trying to attribute some knowledge or some insights to who these people are so we can talk to them, we can target them, we can address them. And so advertisers can leverage that to engage with their audience, but still respecting those users' privacy. That is done mostly by combining new technologies such as edge computing, AI, which is another favorite keyword at the moment, but not generative AI, just AI, and sensory data, which is kind of an untapped, underutilized data, to say something a bit more meaningful about a mobile game player. For example, that like me, I'm currently, for example, if I was playing with my phone, but I will be currently indoor. This is my home and work, probably a work break. The weather is kind of sunny, cloudy, weird. It's London, semi-warm, semi-windy. It's afternoon on a weekday. I'm currently stationary at my desk. You can really start building a tapestry of what my day has looked like, and that I've walked earlier, worked out, and really like understanding where my mind is at, what could be my mindset, and then understanding who I am as a person as well, of knowing that, for example, I'm a white collar worker, desk jobber, long hour worker, pet owner, socializer, streamer, and I don't know, house proud. There is a long list of things I am.
Interesting. Obviously, this is somewhere and a topic of mine that I find really interesting too. I would say, in my nearly 10 years of being in programmatic, identity has always been something that has evolved over time since my very early stages of my career. But I would say it's definitely probably my weaker point in terms of my kind of skill set. So I'm learning as much as like anyone else is probably watching this too. So I want to kind of dive into a little bit more of like, you obviously kind of listed some of those key kind of data points, but what is the concept of like first party data and how do you kind of collect that? And what does it particularly mean when we talk about gaming, and how can that be applied?
Great question. First party data traditionally, or by definition, is data that belongs to the publishers. Data the publisher collects at first hand, it belongs to them, and it's probably one of the most reliable data source because it can more easily be verified. Traditionally, or have we seen first party data is usually user profile, things that the publisher collects from the user at first hand. So asking the user, what's your age and gender, or any type of information, building that profile, but based on their interactions within that space within the app. While retailers traditionally have quite a lot of first party data because they have purchase data, they have your address. If you register your profile, you have to give all of this information because you're trying to get a product. Games on mobile games, more often than not, do not have that much information about the gamer, the player, because you don't really need to have a profile, and a lot of them don't like to ask these questions because players can feel like, why do I need to say that? It's not necessarily, you don't want to add more frictions into the gameplay. So a lot of the time you just simply don't know. Those are people who play, and you understand how they play the game, and you understand what level they get to, what type of environments they engage with, but that is quite difficult to translate into concept brands will traditionally understand, or how we would traditionally understand first-party data. It is first-party data, but it's just, it's hard to utilize first-party data. Then there is more new layer of new first-party data. What we do, for example, is also first-party data, because sensory data is a different kind of first-party data. All data that comes from the device owned by the publisher is a first-party data as well. It's just, and it's always been there, same as anything else. It's just have not been leveraged as much in the past, because the fact that as is in a raw state, it's really meaningless. Nobody wants to, what are you going to do with the magnetometer minus 26? It's even worse than someone getting to level 10. At least that is somewhat comprehensible. Maybe advertisers don't know how to target that either way, but like level 10, at least you understand something there. Someone who's at least engaged with the game. Magnetometer minus 26 is just, okay. So that was useless. Thank you very much. And I think that that's where there are various sources of first-party data, but we haven't really unpacked completely how those can be harnessed and leveraged. Things that are changing right now, but it will be a transition. Cookies, for example, used to be first-party data, but it's slowly going away. IDFA, all of those lovely IDs, but that's just one type.
No, amazing. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So obviously, it's something that you touched on before that I wanted to come back to. You were talking two keywords really. You mentioned privacy, and you mentioned like first-party data, sensory data, audience data, essentially. But you know, sometimes it can be considered that these two things work very much in opposite directions. You can't have audience data without respecting privacy, and vice versa. So do you agree with that sentiment? I assume you don't, but I really want to know kind of what are your thoughts on striking that balance between what these are kind of two seemingly conflicting concepts. Like, can they coexist? Like, how do we strike that balance between the two?
It's a fair point, and I think that normally I would say, you know what, it can be, don't, like, you can just leverage, don't need to compromise, but it is true there's always some, like, an extreme point of complete privacy is you going to the middle of the woods, disconnecting everything and living as a hermit. An extreme point of full data is when someone is putting a tracker under your skin and like following you around. And usually the truth and the balance and the quality of life is somewhere in between those two extremes. However, what we can do as an industry is take more responsibility and take more ownership on how do we use data better, and how we collect data better, how do we utilize the data that we have better and more responsibly, and what is data that is, and understanding the different data. The data is not one big box. Not all data is equal. Even the law will treat certain data as sensitive data as more sensitive than others, because some data is more private and more will hurt someone more if you expose it than other data, and that's where personal data kind of differentiate in other type of data. And the idea is to determine, maybe to try to not utilize, not access personal data as much as possible. So yes, of course, consent is one of the main keywords, and say everything collected with consent, and collecting personal data with consent. And of course, consent really matters in all aspects of life, but consent really matters. However, we're asked for consent also so frequently that, and so confusingly, that often you can also argue, is asking for consent really means that the user gives consent? Because most of the time they're just mostly bombarded by ways to click things, and they're just trying to get somewhere. They have no idea what they're clicking because you're asking them to click a million things per day, and that's also a really horrible experience. And they still don't really know, they still don't really consent to what's happening because they have no idea what's actually happening. But I'm not saying take away consent. I'm saying maybe we can do that better, but also that consent is not like the jack of all trades. It's not a solution for everything. It's not like you can't really put it in everything. We're just going to ask for consent. People will not always give it. People will not always opt in. Also, you're not necessarily doing a really good job in respecting their privacy by doing so.
So do you believe that we've focused too much on obtaining consent, that we've kind of lost our way in terms of trying to collect data? Because obviously, like you said, people can just walk away from that. They don't necessarily want to give anything over. And then we know nothing about that individual.
I think that we have lost consent. We've focused a lot of consent that we sometimes forget what's the core of, what's the meaning of protecting privacy.
Right.
Because it became synonyms, and we have maybe forgotten to explore the core objective maybe of protecting users' privacy. And what happens if we walk away from personal data? Meaning, we refer a lot to sensory data because it's what we do. It's not the only examples, but it is a good example. But sensory data, contextual data are examples of information that is simply not personal. And you can already tell quite a lot about the person, about the user, about the player by leveraging those data points. So you're not violating their privacy, you're not using personal information, but you're also providing them with a really good experience. And for me, that's kind of trying to strike a balance where there is data, it's just not personal data. And it's not identified on an individual level. So it's not really, I'm following you, this particular person, but rather I understand that you care about streaming, or you care about like workout and fitness, and I'm going to just share information, or I'm going to target you with things that you probably will care about or be interested in more than the things that you're not interested in. And I think that a lot of the time we neglected the fact that new technology means that we don't have to do things in the same way we've done it before.
So where do we draw the line in terms of what's considered personal data? Would you consider demographic data to be personal? I'll tell you why, because I want to kind of dive into some real life concepts. I would say 9 out of 10 times when I get a brief, it tends to typically be around how do we target females aged 18 to 40 or males aged 16 to 34. And then we'll have that one brief that we get, which is how do we target females aged 45 to 55 that are interested in cats and listen to rap music or heavy metal. And that's like really, really granular. And there is obviously a difficulty with really understanding who that person is or how to target them through. I think that's where kind of contextual becomes very hard, because you have to insinuate based on gaming whether that game or that gameplay really has that audience. And sometimes it becomes a bit stereotypical. You might assume that a game like High Heels, which I play, by the way, and I totally boss every single level I do, but you might think that that's a game for females, and actually there is a male audience playing it. So how, I guess, how do you determine, things like demographic data? How do you make assumptions about people who are male or female or certain ages? And B, where do we draw the line between when that becomes personal and identifiable?
I think that it also depends on the source of data. So if it's data that was given to you, or like a publisher asked and that's self-determined and people give it as part of their profile, it's different than if you defer the data from different sources and based on other information, and then you conclude that this is likely to be a female and likely to be of a certain age range, because it's more of an assumption based on other data source. So it depends on what's the source of the data to determine whether it's personal data or not. Now, how do you determine, or what's the power of, how do you do demographic well? at the scale in gaming, and that can be a bit rudimentary. So in the past, we had about two main paths. One is IDs. So either you have an ID and that ID is matched against a DMP, and then you can get, like, you can have, oh, this is like those users are male, those users are female, this is the age, this is what you do. And there's still an ID route because some users still have an ID available, still possible. Then you have the question of there's some services that are able to provide on an app level based on the category. If it's more likely to be male, more likely to be female, what's the likelihood of that like the age range of the likelihood for that game. But that's on a game level, and as you say, games are often mixed, especially mobile games, which have wider audience. It's really hard to have on a game level a clear determination of this is the entire user base. We then enter a world of what can we do further? How do we do this better? And then again, AI comes to play, or just also better math. Is how do we utilize different data sources, add more data sources to predict maybe on a bid level. Now, on a bid level, it's not a user level, because a user, if you don't have an ID, it's any bid, like you'll just determine it by the information within the bid. But the bid itself contains quite a lot of sources of information from the app itself. And yes, you can have the category, but you can also have the name of the users that left comment about the game. You can also have the language they use. You also have the image, the description of the game, and that's on a game level, but much, much deeper than just a category. You have information such as device model. You have information about the OS, you have information, basically have different sources of information. Doing that, running multiple models to then determine the probability of the age and gender of a user on a bid level allows to try to find an equilibrium between point A and point B, which is more giving a prediction on a user level rather on a bid level, which is an individual level, so not just a game, but also still maintaining that respect and trying to say, you know what, we don't want too much. We just want really generic data, and we will figure out what we think it means. And that's okay. There will be a margin of error, and that exists with any system. Even with self-determined data, people lie. There is a bias there. It's a known bias. So it's okay. And as long as the model, and you improve the model and the model is strong enough and you're able to leverage technology in a way that is effective, you can do quite a lot with quite little data to begin with. I don't know if that answers your question. I tried though.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a good segue into my next question, actually, which is, you're talking about how you can do quite a lot with, very little. And I think sometimes it can be it can seem like it's very complex and very confusing. And we need to make it easy for advertisers to really understand this, because I think with everything that's kind of going on, it sometimes feels like advertisers are a little bit at a loss, and they're really trying to understand what is the best way they can reach their target audience. Because, yeah, I mean, going for just a scalable campaign is great, and trying to hit as many eyeballs as possible. But in really to harness return of investment, or return of ad spend without having ad wastage, you really want to try and get close as possible to your audience as possible. And it sounds like this is a great solution to do that. So what are the first steps, if advertisers were considering this, that they should take?
Well, first, step number one is gaming is a wonderful environment to invest in. It really, really is. If we're looking at it as it's bigger than social, even there's as much users, it's very diverse. It's one of the only environments when you can engage with users across multiple life points and touch points across the day. So one, don't be too worried about that environment. The fact that it's a bit different, it's much more similar to everything else. Really, really similar social in many, many ways. In terms of usage patterns, in terms of the type of usage and frequency, there's a lot of similarities there. Second, data is important. There is nothing we can't really skip it. I think that's where gaming struggled a bit, but new partners, AdInMo, and there are others exploring, but AdInMo, for example, is one example, is trying to invest quite a lot in understanding and unpacking who are the people behind the gamers and behind the games and behind the inventory, and allowing their advertisers to get in touch with them in meaningful ways. So I think it's mostly trying to think, who are you working with, and what information are they able to provide you about your campaigns, and what targeting is available to you. Because if you're not able to get any type of reporting, any type of information regarding the audience, maybe it's not the best environment for you as a brand who knows, you know what, I'm not just trying to get as many people as possible, but I'm trying to customize this campaign at least to some degree. Demographic is a great place to start with, as most campaigns do come with demographic information requirements, some sort of targeting in the first place. So if we just want demographic, that definitely is a good place to start, and working with partners that are innovating and are thinking about data and investing in that area in a meaningful way is really important.
Nice. Well, I mean, it's great to hear your insights on this, because I think it's such a crucial topic. And even myself having this conversation, I feel a little bit more empowered about how to talk about it and what's really important. I think the one thing that really stuck out for me as well, because I've always been concerned about how to really get that blend between respecting privacy of a user, but also being able to utilize and harness data points that necessarily don't identify people as or be personable, personally identifiable, which I think is the key point here. And I think with solutions like yours, you can really change the game in terms of just actually being a bit more clever about how you actually target individuals. Because as we know, more relevant advertising is better working advertising. And I think we've gotten to I personally feel like we've got stuck in this rut of just doing it for the sake of doing it, and not really understanding or trying to understand how we can make ads work better, particularly in these environments. And I think for gaming, because of the way that it is right now as a media channel, where we're still really trying to educate buyers, and we're really still trying to, grow this and become a very reputable, measurable, targetable format, this is obviously going to help take that one step further. Just to kind of summarize and just to finish, if you could give one pro tip or one point that you want to communicate to buyers looking to get into this space, particularly in-game advertising, what would that be?
We don't need to be so attached to the way we have done things. Just because we've done things a certain way in the past does not mean we have to continue doing them in the same way in the future. Mm-hmm. We have a really great opportunity to do things a bit better and leverage new technology in a way that allows us to do things we never thought we could, like in-moment targeting, like really engaging with users in moments that matter without violating their privacy. And it's not that this is something that was taken away from us, but if we start thinking of this more as an opportunity to be innovative, to be creative, to be adventurous, we will do much better. However, look, there is, in any pie, there is X amount of pie. So measurement, targeting, being efficient, being effective is really important. So I'm not saying trial for the sake of trialing. See who can actually give you the right information on your investment and the right ability to engage with your audience, and invest your money there. If they invested this much on their targeting, they're probably going to take care of you.
Thank you so much. I mean,
Thank you.
what I can say is like but definitely for me and for anyone watching, I think you've definitely shed light on this, which can seem sometimes a bit of a scary and reductive place, but actually it is evolving, and I think it's evolving in the right way. And I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities to come about. Obviously, at the end of this video, our contact details will be shared, but I will empower anyone watching this to get in touch with you and as the expert in this field, to obviously gain more information specifically to any of their needs. Because like you said, I think it's about them and about an advertiser that wants to really get to or understand their objective first, as the kind of first main point of call. So yeah, thank you to
Thank you.
everyone, and we look forward to the next session. So thank you, Emma.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone who decided to listen.
So thank you to Emma from NumberEight for sharing your insights on this crucial topic. As the digital landscape continues to transform, it's evident that there is a need to have a blend of privacy, but also be able to take the right signals and cues and contextual data from individuals that allows us to create better personalized marketing while safeguarding users. And as you've heard from this session today, it was a thought-provoking discussion, shedding light on how this evolving identity solution landscape can thrive in a post-cookie internet era. Don't let iOS 14.5 and its deprecation of IDFAs, or even third-party cookies, or the minimal first-party data that we seem to have our hands on these days kind of throw you off. There are ways in which we can find that right balance between data and privacy that becomes a winning strategy, particularly when you're looking at targeting audiences on mobile games. So until next time, please stay curious and keep evolving and exploring this ever-changing world of Inside Insights for in-game. Thank you.